Welcome to Occult Archives. You know, the show where we kind of dig into these books that have a certain reputation.
A reputation for danger.
Yeah, exactly. Too dangerous, maybe, for most folks to even, look at.
Secrets better left buried.
Tonight, we're going full alchemist, though.
We are.
Think less like, dusty old books and more like crucibles and bubbling potions,
The transformative power of alchemy.
Yeah, and, those three famous alchemical ingredients.
Yeah.
Sulphur, mercury, and salt.
The alchemical trinity.
Exactly. Well, we're going to find out that they're not just ingredients. They're like...
fundamental principles.
Yes, thank you. Principles of all matter, at least according to the alchemists, right?
That's right. The blueprints of reality, you could say.
This is The Deep Dive, and tonight it's episode 110, The Alchemical Trinity, Unlocking Sulphur, Mercury, and Salt in the Transformation of Metals. Buckle, right?
You're going deep.
And to guide us through all these alchemical secrets, we've got Johann Rudolph Glauber, a 17th century alchemist.
An experienced alchemist.
Yeah, and we're looking at his Treatise of the Three Principles of Metals, which honestly is a little bit more straightforward than some of the other stuff out there.
No, absolutely. Glauber was building on the work of Paracelsus, trying to clarify these ideas.
Make it make sense, right?
Exactly. He wanted to demystify the jargon a bit, make the principles more accessible.
And Glauber was all about that hands-on experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just theories. He was in the lab doing the work.
A practical alchemist.
So what we're going to do tonight, what we're going to do in this deep dive, is really figure out what Glauber thought about these three principles: sulfur, mercury, and salt.
What did they represent to him?
Yeah, and how did he think they worked? Both for, turning lead into gold, the whole transmutation thing.
Classic goal of alchemy.
But also, and this is interesting, for medicine, healing the body,
Glauber believed these principles had applications in both realms.
So if you've ever been a little curious about alchemy, the secrets, the whispers.
The mysteries.
This deep dive's for you. Let's get started. First up, sulfur. What was so special about sulfur for Glauber?
Sulfur was like a primary force. He considered it essential, absolutely essential for both medicine and for the transmutation of metals.
And Glauber was really critical of some of the older writings on sulfur, wasn't he? He thought they were way too obscure.
Right, shrouded in secrecy. He appreciated Paracelsus for making things a bit clearer.
Glauber wanted to, share the knowledge, make it understandable.
Yes, but cautiously. He still believed this knowledge was powerful and shouldn't be given to just anyone.
Yeah, okay. So he actually describes sulfur as, bitumen, which I looked it up. It's basically natural asphalt.
That's right. He's grounding this idea of sulfur in something very tangible.
And he goes on and on about how this bitumen, or sulfur, has all these virtues.
Virtues for physicians and alchemists.
Yeah, for healing and for transmutation. It wasn't just about, the smell,
He emphasized direct experience and observation with sulfur, not just theoretical knowledge.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Glauber basically says that sulfur's ability to change forms, to be transmuted, proves Aristotle wrong.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
Aristotle, of course, argued against the very possibility of transmutation.
Glauber's like, nope, look at sulfur, it transforms.
He's challenging a fundamental tenet of Aristotelian philosophy.
Yeah. Okay, so then he talks a lot about purifying sulfur. It's not good enough in its raw natural state.
It had to be cleansed, separated from impurities.
He says, exceeding even the whiteness of snow. That's pretty white.
The alchemist believed purity was crucial for unlocking a substance's true potential.
It's like refining gold, right? Getting rid of all the dross.
Exactly. They used the art of separating, which they called hyssopus, to achieve this.
Hyssopus.
Yeah.
That sounds very biblical.
It does have biblical connections, Ashley. David asked to be cleansed with hyssop.
Interesting. Okay, so now he gets into this idea of embryonate sulfur inside metals.
The hidden sulfur within their essence.
And he even connects specific metals to different parts of the body. Like gold is connected to the heart, silver to the brain.
Right. He's suggesting this connection between the celestial, the metallic, and the human.
It's all connected,
A holistic view of the universe.
But then he says that this embryonate sulfur in metals is different from the vegetable sulfur that's in, wood,
The sulfur in wood is more fleeting, more like fire itself.
Okay, so it's all sulfur, but different kinds of sulfur.
Different forms, different levels of manifestation.
He even compares sulfur to this invisible fire that consumes diseases.
Like a hidden fire burning away illness.
And he says there are actually two kinds of this embryonate sulfur. One that's fixed, but can be made volatile, and another that's pure fire.
Both involved in consumption, both driving forces.
Right, so it's complex. It's not simple at all, this sulfur. And Glauber's clear that you need a skilled alchemist.
A judicious chemical operator.
Yeah, to even begin working with this stuff.
It's not for the uninitiated.
He then starts talking about using sulfur for medicine.
He suggests it can comfort vital organs and heal lung ailments.
He even thinks it can replace aurum potaviel,
Drinkable gold.
which was like a huge deal in alchemy.
A highly prized elixir.
But he also says not to use it for fiery diseases.
You have to know what you're doing.
So there's a right way and a wrong way.
Right. Precisely.
Okay, now he gets into this process called mortification of sulfur. Sounds kind of scary.
It involves reducing yellow sulfur to a black powder using aqua fortis.
Aqua fortis, strong nitric acid. That is scary. And then you wash it and then heat it.
Reverberation. It's heated in stages, causing it to change color white, yellow, and finally red.
Red like cinnabar.
Exactly. Glauber says this red stage is incredibly important. It's the beginning of thy riches.
Because it can turn silver into gold.
It's also believed to have potent healing properties for the body.
Right, right. So sulfur is medicine and the key to wealth. I'm liking this sulfur.
It's a multifaceted substance.
He even mentions Paracelsus using sulfur to transmute gems. Like you leave a crystal in this oil for a while and it takes on these incredible colors better than any natural gemstone.
The alchemists believed they could improve upon nature itself.
Now, Glauber didn't agree with everything Paracelsus said, did he?
No, he didn't. He disagreed with Paracelsus's method of fixing sulfur using only aqua fortis. He argued that you need salts.
To, like, help the aqua fortis react with the sulfur.
To create an ingress, an entry point.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And he really liked using salt niter for this.
He calls the process of fiery union a marriage in hell.
Marriage in hell? That's pretty dramatic. To create wealthy children, as he calls them.
Which is fixed sulfur.
Right, right. Fixed sulfur. So he's got this whole system. You know, it's not just mixing things randomly.
There's a specific process.
And he talks about this this lost art of making black sulfur white and fixed.
Nodal Hyssopaic art.
Yeah, and how he wants to bring it back.
He lamented its loss.
And he says, this black sulfur, well, you got to purify it before you can use it with gold for transmutation.
It has to be refined.
Make it worthy of the gold.
Right, exactly.
And he gets all mystical talking about Demogorgon.
Demogorgon, the central fire of the earth.
And a spirit of sulfur. Where does Glauber even come up with this stuff?
It's a blend of cosmology, mythology, and chemistry.
Okay, so back to the practical stuff. He gives us his method for washing black sulfur white using sal mirabile and aqua fortis. It's pretty detailed.
He wanted to provide a clear guide, though some key details are still obscured.
Right, like that secret ingredient.
Of course.
But he does talk about heating it until it turns into a red stone and dissolving it, and then carefully adding aqua fortis.
He emphasizes caution, drop by drop, to avoid a violent reaction.
Alchemy sounds dangerous.
It could be.
And he talks about this distillation process where a red vapor of sulfur goes up, and what's left behind is the white sulfur.
The fixed sulfur, purified and separated from its volatile parts.
Okay, and then get this. The red aqua fortis turns clear again, but...
It retains its potency, its virtue.
Yeah, and then he gets this white powder from it, the soul of sulfur.
A highly concentrated essence, incredibly valuable.
Good for medicine, good for transmutation, even better if you add gold to it.
It's considered the most potent form of sulfur.
Wow, that's a lot of steps.
Alchemy requires patience.
He mentions other ways to fix sulfur too, like with lixivium, which is made from ashes, or with oil of vitriol. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, huh? Or fix some sulfur.
Many paths to the same goal.
And the fixed white sulfur, he says it could be used for all kinds of things. Besordic, which is like an antidote, lung problems, stomach problems, even wrinkles.
A veritable panacea.
And for alchemy, turning base metals into silver and gold.
And for creating living mercury, which we'll discuss later.
Okay, we're getting there.
Yeah.
Now he goes back to the myths with the story of old Demogorgon eating his son, which of course is a metaphor for fixed sulfur-consuming crude sulfur
A cycle of renewal.
to produce golden crowns.
Perfected metals.
It's like sulfur's getting stronger, more powerful
By incorporating its less refined form.
Right, right. But then he says that it's difficult for fixed sulfur to get inside metals.
It loses its fatness and penetrating power through purification.
It needs help to get in there, like a key, maybe?
He suggests using crude sulfur or antimony to help it gain ingress.
And he's got his own method using sal, mirabile, and aqua fortis. But this time you don't wash away the salt. The salt helps the sulfur penetrate the metal.
Different preparations for different applications.
And then he's back to the soul of sulfur, that white powder. He calls it a diaphoretic.
A substance that promotes sweating.
Yeah, and he also compares it to oriental bizor.
A highly prized antidote.
And he even links it to the philosophic unicorn.
The mythical creature embodying purity and healing power.
So this soul of sulfur is pretty magical stuff, it seems. And then he's talking about dissolving gold in aqua regis and adding that to the sulfur before fixing it.
Infusing it with the essence of gold.
Right, right, like a gold boost. And then he explains how to turn the white sulfur red.
Through open flame reverberation.
Not in a closed vessel like before. And if you add gold to it, it turns purple. Lots of color changes. It's like the chemistry magic show.
Yeah.
He briefly mentions another way to fix sulfur, one that preserves its ingress, its ability to get inside the metal. So he's got options.
He's experimented with various methods.
He even talks about this perpetual metallurgy using sulfur, where you can like endlessly create silver and gold.
A sustainable process for generating precious metals.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
And he's got a whole proverb about it.
Linking Saturn, Mars, fire, and art to finding treasure.
And then, oh man, this is where it gets really tricky. He starts talking about these gradatory waters that contain fixed sulfur. You use them to slowly transform base metals like lead into
nobler metals.
gold. But making these waters, well, he says it's difficult.
A closely guarded alchemical secret.
But then he gives us his artificial manual compendium, his method. But you need this special mercurial sulfur.
Like cinnabarine sulfur or flour of gold.
Yeah, which dissolves easier. He says it's way more potent, better for medicine A&D for the metals.
It yields a greater tincture.
But don't worry, if you don't have that fancy sulfur, you can still use the regular stuff. It's just not as good.
It's less potent.
So basically, sulfur goes from this black, yucky, flammable thing to a white,
Fixed and fire-resistant substance.
yeah, through all that washing and all that aqua regis stuff. And now it can be used for healing and for changing metals.
But it's still imperfect. It needs mercury to truly achieve the alchemist's goals.
Okay, on to Mercury then.
The second principle.
He makes it clear, Mercury, that's what you need for the Philosopher's Stone.
The ultimate goal of alchemy.
But he says not all mercury is created equal.
There are mercuries of metals.
Everyone thinks the best mercury comes from the vitriol of Mars and Venus.
Iron and copper.
Yeah.
Because of their abundance of tinctures.
Right, those coloring agents. But Glauber, he's like, hold on, I've found great mercury from Saturn too.
Saturn lead.
He's going against what everyone thinks.
He trusted his own experience in the lab.
He's a rebel.
An experimentalist.
And here's another interesting thing. He says, don't bother with just gold and silver to get your mercury and sulfur.
They're homogeneous and harder to work with.
Less potential. He says, go for the cheaper metals, like Mars, iron. It has more of that.
But more tincture.
But it's volatile. So look for Mercury in Saturn and sulfur in Mars. It's like he's flipping everything upside down.
He's challenging the alchemists to look beyond the obvious.
To see the hidden potential. I like it.
It's a shift in perspective.
Okay, so the problem with Mercury, he says, is that it's trapped in metals.
Bound by superfluous burning sulfur.
Impurities. So you got to mortify those impurities.
And break down the prison walls of the metal.
Free the mercury. And there's this other thing in there with the mercury, pinging sulfur.
Right, and this sulfur needs vulgar gold for fixation.
More gold. So Glauber's tried lots of different ways to extract this mercury philosophers.
He was constantly experimenting, refining his methods.
Okay, so how do you do it? Well, he says hard metals, you got to dissolve them first, unlock them. And the best way to do that is with corrosive spirits of salt.
Strong acids.
But then you got to mortify those corrosive spirits because they're bad for the mercury. You use salts like Salt of tartar or spirit of urine for that.
To neutralize the corrosive power.
So that the mercury can escape, right?
Ascend during distillation.
Okay, yeah. He also explains how to get mercury out of already dissolved metals, like vitriol. You got to distill it to get this acid spirit in a fiery oil.
Mm.
And then
you use calcined tartar to mortify the corrosive spirit. This reveals the mercury.
Mortification. And then you get this mercurial water that's kind of like, spirit of urine.
Yeah.
Which then has to be
Rectified.
purified.
Right.
Right. Lots of steps. And then this is where he gets to the good part. Conjunction of philosophic mercury with gold. What does that even mean?
It means combining your prepared mercury with a solution of gold.
You basically throw gold into this special mercury water.
And the gold attracts the mercury.
And they combine, right, to make this slime. Or maybe a yellow powder. He's not really clear on that.
It's a precipitate, a union of the gold and mercury.
Then you filter it and wash it, and boom, you're on your way to making a tincture.
Mm.
But wait, he says you got to test your mercury first, make sure it's good.
An impure mercury will yield gold that fulminates.
Explodes. So that's bad. How do you test it?
Heat the mercury with gold. If it turns purple, you're good to go.
Purple's the magic color.
It signifies a successful imbibition.
Okay, so purple means good. And you got to be patient, he says.
Don't rush the process of fixation.
If you use too much heat, the mercury will,
Evaporate.
yeah, gone. And no tincture for you. He's got other ways to fix mercury with gold, too, but
But those secrets are better left for another time.
not for the unworthy, right?
Precisely.
More testing. You can precipitate the mercury out of the water using oil of vitriol.
Which will produce an ash-colored powder.
And then you can either bring it back to life with oil of tartar.
Vivify it.
Yeah, or you can distill it. Or, here's another test. Evaporate some of the mercury on a silver plate over a fire. If it turns the silver purple.
Good mercury.
Ding, 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 we have a winner. You can also digest the mercury with gold filings, he says, but.
But again, patience is key.
And now we're talking antimony. He's got this whole method for preparing tinging mercury of antimony.
It involves fusing antimony with saltpeter and tartar.
More saltpeter. That stuff's everywhere in alchemy.
And then dissolving the regulus.
The what?
The regulus, the metallic form of antimony.
Oh, and then adding cell ammoniac. More salts.
And sublimating it.
That means heating it until it turns into a vapor, right?
Right. And this vapor contains the mercury of antimony.
So you're capturing the essence of the antimony.
Exactly. It can then be used like the mercury of vitriol.
And he actually thinks antimony is a better source of mercury than vitriol.
The ancient philosophers favored antimony.
Interesting. More options. He talks about preparing tinging mercury from iron and copper using only salts. And he lists all these salts. Tartar, salt of urine.
Soot, blood, hair, horns, hoofs, eggshells.
Eggshells. What?
It sounds strange, but these organic materials were believed to hold potent alchemical properties.
Okay. And you can use glass, brass, or copper containers for this, but watch out for that copper corrosion.
Some metals can react with the mercurial water.
Yeah. Don't want to ruin your experiment. Now, here's a simpler method, he says. You can use just tartar or even, get this, burnt wine lees.
Again, the alchemists were very resourceful.
And you can use that to get mercury out of metals and minerals. He explains this process with steel filings and water, where you add the tartar and basically,
Liberates the mercury.
which you then capture.
It's a process of separation and refinement.
Right, right. And adding sal ammoniac makes it even better, he says. Lots of sal ammoniac in this episode. And he talks about making mercury of lead, also using just tartar. You steep lead filings in vinegar with some powdered tartar, and then
Distill it.
and out comes the mercurial spirit. He says you can also get mercury from what's left behind. But
It's inferior.
okay, so different methods, different quality.
Right.
And he gives us another method for mercury of antimony, again, using just tartar. Man, tartar's like the Swiss Army knife of alchemy. It does everything.
It's a versatile reagent.
Okay, so here's another way to get this tinging mercurial spirit. You use pure spirit of wine. He says this method gets you the purest sulfur and mercury.
It leaves behind the gross matter.
And he claims it makes a much better tincture than using regular water. So spirit of wine is the way to go for this one.
For the most potent extraction.
He's even got a whole other book on this, his Spagyric Pharmacopoeia.
A wealth of alchemical knowledge.
Okay, now he's talking about making good mercury from Saturn or Luna.
Lead or silver.
You dissolve them in aqua fortis and then
Precipitate them with salt water, wash them, and mix them with fixed white sulfur.
that white sulfur again.
And then distill it all with strong fire.
This gives you this this heavy sublimat.
which dissolves to form a potent mercurial water.
That can dissolve any metal.
Yeah.
And the water from lead works best with iron, and the water from silver works best with gold.
Specific affinities.
Okay. And the fixed sulfur, he says it's there to keep the metals from fusing together. Makes sense. He then talks about Jupiter, tin, and how it makes an excellent mercury, too. A very subtle spirit that loves gold and can precipitate it out of Aqua Regis.
Powerful attraction.
And then he mentions his secret sal ammoniac, which can make a really strong mercurial water from any metal. He's not giving up all his secrets.
Some knowledge is best kept close.
All right. But then, well, this is interesting. He says you can make philosophic mercury really easily and cheaply. You just need, well, you need human dung and urine.
An unexpected source material.
Yeah, you ferment that for a month and distill it, and you get this mercurial spirit.
Which can be rectified and used to create a universal medicine.
He even says the smell goes away when you treat it with Aqua Regis, so don't worry about that.
Alchemy is full of surprises.
Yeah. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he's got another method using common mercury.
Dissolving it in aqua fortis, mortifying with spirit of urine and sublimating it.
And you repeat this like 7 to 12 times.
To imbue it with tincture.
Wow, that's dedication.
Yeah.
And then you can fix it into a red stone.
For transmuting metals.
He's saying you can make ordinary mercury as good as the mercury of metals.
Exalt it through purification and potentiation.
So there you have it, mercury. Now for the big one.
Salt.
The third principle, the hardest one to figure out.
The most elusive.
Glauber says the old writings on salt were so confusing, they led alchemists astray.
Shrouded in obscurity.
He even talks about how long it took him to figure it out. Years of work, tons of money.
And then, he claims, God revealed it to him.
A divine revelation.
The most famous salt.
But he's adamant that this is not just some, made-up story.
He insists his work is based on experience, on laboratory results.
So what is this salt of philosophers? Well, he says it's oil of vitriol, but prepared the right way, and then coagulated with white fusible sulfur.
To form a sweet, fusible stone.
A stone that's not actually salty.
It's a paradox.
And of course, he doesn't tell us exactly how to coagulate it. Some secrets are too precious.
Better left for those who are truly ready.
Yeah, he says if you want to know more, pray and read other philosophers.
Seek divine guidance and delve into the wisdom of the ancients.
He's not making it easy for us, is he?
The path to true knowledge is rarely straightforward.
Okay, but this salt, he says, it can be used to make tinctures that can, well, they can perfect metals and minerals.
Turn them into gold.
Gold, the ultimate gold.
The philosopher's stone.
So it all comes down to this salt.
It's the key to transmutation.
Now, he does explain that oil of vitriol can be made in a bunch of different ways. And the common kind, you can easily turn that into a sweet stone with sulfur.
Sulfur adulterates and coagulates the corrosive vitriol,
And he talks about this special blood-red oil of vitriol,
which can tinge white metals red.
gold. But making it,
Well,
that's a whole other secret.
a closely guarded secret shrouded in metaphors and symbolism.
He calls it the blood of the green lion.
Yeah.
And the wood, or tree of life.
Evocative imagery.
He says both the regular white oil of vitriol and this red one can be coagulated into stones, but they have different powers. The red one makes gold and turns white crystals into colored gems, while the white one can, well, it can't make gold on its own, but it can draw the tincture out of precious stones.
It can extract the essence of color and potency from other substances.
Okay, that's a lot to take in. But basically, he's saying that this philosopher's stone, this salt, it can do amazing things.
It can transmute metals, create gemstones, and heal the body.
But it can't touch vulgar mercury, regular mercury. You need fixed mercury for that.
It needs to be refined and prepared.
Right. And then, this is a huge secret, he says there's a magnetic salt that can pull the tincture out of precious stones like rubies and sapphires.
And simultaneously infuse silver with that tincture, turning it into gold.
It's like magnetic, right? It attracts and expels.
Of dual nature.
He even compares it to Pythagoras' idea of the transmigration of souls.
The movement and transformation of essences.
Okay. And there's more. He talks about these peculiar spirits.
Spirits that can transport the flying souls of metals and minerals.
It's all about these essences, these souls, being moved around and transformed.
It's very much in line with alchemical philosophy.
He even compares this to the spirit and salt of the world, freeing souls from the prison of hell.
A metaphor for the alchemical process of purification and liberation.
So it's spiritual too, right? It's not just about chemistry.
Alchemy was always intertwined with spirituality.
He says these spirits can extract the pure essence of a metal, the part that gives it color and power.
And then fix that essence, make it stable and potent.
But he's not giving us the whole method. He calls these spirits in the salt pearls.
Pearls of great price.
And he says, don't share this knowledge with anyone who's not worthy. He even invokes Harpocrates, the god of silence, a warning against revealing these secrets to the uninitiated.
This salt, it has so many names. Soap of the wise, Hercules, Herculean key, key of the philosophers.
It was a substance of immense power and versatility.
It calls it soap because it washes metals and makes them pure white, like regular soap,
Cleansing and purification.
And it's Herculean because it can overpower anything. Like he literally says, it can open any closed